Hello, and welcome to Chapter 3 of Maintaining Creativity 7. My name is Scott Walker, and I'm the Executive Director of CSARN, and I suspect, like most of you, an elder professional artist as well. We welcome artists today from Wolfe Island to Manitoulin Island to Pender Island, from Montreal to Munster, from Toronto to Tacoma, from Calgary to Kingston, from Lethbridge to Lunenburg to Los Angeles, and everywhere in between where artists live and create. We acknowledge at this point that we live and create on the traditional territories of many Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land, now called Canada, since time immemorial. And we acknowledge this as part of our covenant with First Nations to share, respect, and protect the land in the spirit of peace and friendship for ourselves and to honor the future generations of all our nations. Here's how Chapter 3 is going to unfold. We will talk about today's topic, shifting creative gears, with our three guest stars. We invite you to join in with questions for our panel. You put your questions in the Q&A box. Then we'll take about a 10-minute break and move into our breakout rooms. They're kind of like our online salons. If you're not familiar with them, our on salons are chat groups, discussion groups that go on a regular basis. Each of the breakouts will have a moderator. It's a chance to chat with other artists, and it'll last about 40 minutes. And then we'll all gather back together to find out what the other groups talked about. Now, we have a very special announcement to make at the end of today's show, so I recommend you stay around for that. We will be announcing the fourth winner of our annual Robert Johnson Visionary Artist Award. So today, shifting creative gears. I think we've all shifted gears as we create. Sometimes if we just stay within the same discipline, we're still shifting in terms of our craft and our techniques and our abilities to create, evolving as we get older. But some of us have made some pretty drastic or substantial leaps between disciplines. I'm a perfect example. I started my career as a top 40 rock and roll DJ in Winnipeg, but I always wanted to be a musical theater performer, and I got lucky because I was in Winnipeg at the time, which has always had a great theater community. So I got to do some great shows with some great people, and I bounced back and forth between radio and theater my entire life. And even within radio, I've bounced back and forth between private radio, public radio, the CBC, where I was a news anchor, and now internet radio. Along the way, I've been a voice specialist. I've been a recording artist. I've been a producer. And now I'm the executive director of CSARN. Now, some who are not part of the artistic community, civilians, would look at that and say, this guy just hasn't decided what he wants to be when he grows up. But let's face it, we're grown, and the gears keep shifting. So let's talk about that. And oh, by the way, anybody who's seen my grant applications will know that I'm also a creative writer. Yeah, let's begin. I'm going to introduce each of our three distinguished guests. They will each make an opening statement, and then we'll talk about it. We're going to start with our first guest, who has spent most of his career as an opera singer on the world stages. He has performed the dramatic tenor repertoire to great acclaim. He first came to national attention as the winner of the CBC Talent Festival in 1979, and 8 years ago, he joined the CBC as host of Saturday Afternoon at the Opera and Backstage. Please welcome Ben Heppner.
Hello, everyone. I think I'm okay. Am I being heard?
You are being heard and seen.
All right. So I guess I'm up, and I want to just bring up my notes here. This whole episode has to do with the good graces of Marie Poulin, the former senator. She's a hard woman to turn down. Once she fixes her sights on you, it is you're done, and in a very good way. And thank you also, Scott Walker, for telling me that artists don't retire. There is a discussion in our house. My beloved, as I call my wife Karen, is in fact just a little bit younger than me and has reached the age of retirement. But absolutely refuses to say that she is. However, I am of the opinion that I am retired. So my decision to give up the performing career happened over a number of years. And partially it started because I struggled with several issues. Early in my career, I worried about providing for my family, of course, as all artists have to deal with. But as things grew, that became less of a worry. And then there was a growing sense of loneliness as I traveled. My work would take me to foreign cities for weeks on end. If I worked in Chicago or New York, well, okay, I could, if I had a few days off, I could come back. But if I was in Paris or Munich or London, it wasn't so easy to do. So somewhere between 6 and 11 weeks, I would be in those foreign cities. And at first, those weeks away weren't such a hardship. I loved doing my job, singing on the finest stages of the world with the finest colleagues and companies. And to be honest, it was hard to stay connected with my family, but I coped with the solitude by running up some pretty incredible phone bills. If you remember those days, the early days when the good phone line was just not possible and computer connections just didn't exist. As my children grew into adulthood, there was less worry about them. And then my beloved found a profession where she was able to engage all of her giftedness. She became a minister in a church. Now, things seemed perfect. Everything at home was functioning well. Our marriage was in great shape, and Karen was engaged with her job, and our children were successfully launched. I apologize for the notifications that are coming in. And then things started to shift. I seemed less involved with my family now that they were getting on their own. And add to that the inevitable decline in your own vocal ability as you age. Things didn't always go the way I wanted them. Now, I can't say there was one incident that sealed my decision, except to say there was a growing sense of isolation being away more than 30 weeks a year. The new career that I moved to was a no-brainer. I heard about the opening at CBC Radio in 2013. My friend Howard Dick had been the host of Saturday Afternoon at the Opera. And then there was another host, of course, the name fails me, is that I'm live. But the thing is, I actually had dreamt of being a radio host since I was a teenager. And when the opportunity came up, well, it was an easy choice, and I loved it. For a time, I kind of did both together. But then I realized that it wasn't really possible to have a part-time career because you lose some ability as you're not practicing as much as you should. Now, my time on radio was absolute heaven. I had a regular work group, and every week there's not the revolving door of endless varying co-stars and cities to navigate. And the big thing was I was home almost all the time and loving what I call the dailiness of life. I don't know about you, but to me, there's a warmth and comfort that comes from taking out the trash and doing the dishes. Don't tell Karen, she might want more of that. My decision to move on from the radio, though, was more complicated. My work group changed at the end of 2020. 3 of the 5 accepted a retirement package, and all of a sudden I felt unmoored. These people had taught me radio. I sort of was there on their good graces and the skills that they had helped me with. Now, to be honest, the influx of new people was very smooth, but that got me thinking about my own exit strategy. So I started to experience a bit of burnout, nothing really emotional, but more to do with my stories that I had to tell every week. I had to tell basically 3 stories per backstage episode that related to a particular theme. Then that was times 52 weeks a year, times 8 years. So by the time I got to the end of my 8 years, had told most of my stories that I had. And because I wasn't on tour anymore, there were no new ones to take their place. So I started to think about actual retirement. The good news is, I never felt that the international opera career was my point of self-identity. I didn't feel like I was Ben Heppner opera singer. I was Ben Heppner, and I was a family man, husband, father, friend, community member, and I was more connected with home and community in the growing number of grandchildren that were rapidly arriving. So, if I skip to my current life, it kind of revolves around being a better husband, better grandfather, and maybe even friend, something that was much harder to accomplish when I traveled so much. I've always enjoyed learning, and I want to continue that. When compared with my colleagues that are here today, Tanya and Lenore, they are so accomplished, and I haven't yet reached that level of engagement in my post-retirement years. But I'm starting to learn about sound editing, and in the new year, I'm going to be attempt to learn some French. I do okay at German, but my national language has always suffered because of that. So in addition, I'm involved to host, I am hosting arts programs and judging vocal competitions or creating audio recordings for video. And I'm hoping that I can move into some book narrations. I think that would be a natural outcome of that for me. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to use my experience, whether it be on stage or even in radio and just in communication, with helping a younger generation of opera singers in the way that suits me best. So that's basically what I've got to say for now, and we'll open the floor to questions or to the next people who we're going to Lenore and Tanya.
That's what we'll do, Ben. Thank you very much. Interesting opening statements, some really interesting points that I want to come back to once we've heard from our other two guest stars. The first of those is an award-winning actor and producer. She spent 19 years on the daytime drama The Young and the Restless, and she went on to found the Real World Film Festival and serves as its executive director. She finds time somehow on a very busy schedule to sit on many boards, and we are very grateful that one of those boards is CSARN's. Please welcome Tanya Williams.
Hi there.
You're invisible, Tanya, at the moment.
I know it says that my host has to start my video.
Uh-oh.
Okay,
there
now
you are.
Is.
Okay.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. What a great topic. There's no way that you live. I'm 64 years old and, stay, well, you shouldn't, I believe, stay in just one career for the whole entire time. It's very important to, is my video on? I see the.
You're on. Your
for
sound is on.
For some reason, in the speaker mode, it just has your face, your name on here. Anyway, I'll just keep going.
Just keep going.
Yeah. So yeah, someone has to put me in the speaker mode so that it comes up on the fuller screen. But I started my career back when I was like 17, 18 years old, and doing mostly modeling and some small like TV commercials. And then all of a sudden, I decided I really wanted to study acting seriously. I had been studying classical music before that from the age of 5 to 17, was always piano and violin, and for some tenor saxophone. That was for fun for me. And then I really realized from talking to people on set how wonderful it was, the acting profession itself, and the sort of studying of characters, and it was like a scavenger hunt for me, and studying human behavior and how people respond to different things and what triggers people. So I loved everything about that, and ended up going to what was once called Ryerson, called Metropolitan something now, and I totally absolutely enjoyed that. But I always need change. to stay fresh in what I love to do. So once I exhausted everything in Canada of the work that I could do, I made the decision to go to Los Angeles. And it was like, so I was in my early 20s. It was like a whole new journey, in what I had already, started in Toronto. And then this was, I think 1987. I was in my mid to late 20s. I think, can't remember now exactly what I would have been at that point. But then I booked the show Y&R. And even during my 19 years there, I would say starting about the 15th year, I was itchy to do something different. It's not that I didn't love the show and I didn't love the people, I didn't love what I was doing there, but I need a change. In fact, one of the things my mother had said when I booked the show is she goes, try to stay there, try to not move, because I like the feeling of a new adventure and starting something, just starting on a new journey. And part of that journey for me was I would speak at a lot of events, and a lot of people, especially people of color, would come up to me after the events and say, not how could they get in our industry or how could they, do acting. They wanted to just know how they could get to the US. And I found that really depressing, that in the many years since I started in the late 70s, way up to now it's 2000, that not much had moved forward around more inclusion and around more diversity in Canada. It was really blowing up in the US for a while, but Canada was still quite backwards in its inclusion, not only for in front of the camera, but behind the camera for people of color. And this is where it came to me that I wanted to, that I felt, there's a word I just call it, it's an animation. It means something, for me, an animation is something was lifeless, and then it gets animated into some sort of life. And what I look for as I'm walking through life is I'm looking for those things that create this feeling of animation in me. Whether it's people I meet or circumstances I'm in, it usually means that I have something that I can contribute to that. And in return, I'll learn something from that. Because I believe in life, it's a constant back and forth in that. So I've always loved film festivals. I started to go to the Toronto International Film Festival when I was 17, loved sort of foreign films, loved being able to see the kind of things that you wouldn't normally have seen on television. Now it's different. There's so many streaming channels. You can pretty much see a lot of the things you would only have seen at film festivals on those streaming channels. But the idea of being at a festival and meeting all kinds of people, from crews to in front of the camera, to agents, to production staff, to everything, and just standing in line or sitting on the sidewalk in line, waiting to get in. I met the most fascinating people, and I just feel that it's the most nurturing environment to meet professionals, to meet emerging talent, to meet all kinds of different people. And so it came to me that was something I really wanted to do in Canada, that I wanted to create some sort of a platform that could be not just me giving information, because I don't have the answers to everything, even I admit that, and that other people out there could gather, people who knew more than I did could gather and share, their experiences and their ideas with emerging talent and sort of help move them forward. So Real World for me was, first of all, I came up with a name that was a generic name, not a name that could be identified. When you're Black and you start something, everyone assumes it's going to be a Black thing. So this was definitely something that I wanted for Indigenous people. I wanted it for Black people. I wanted it for Asian people, South Asian people, all people of color. And I have now been doing it for 22 years. So I'm ready for another chapter. By the way, it's great we're having this conversation, because I feel like you have to take the time to really identify what makes you happy. And there's a lot of preconceived ideas of what happiness should, look like. It looks like brand new cars, or it looks like certain kinds of clothing, or it looks like a certain amount of money, or a house that you live in. But that's not really the happiness we're talking about, because, and as we get older, this, when you're dead, what are you going to do with all that stuff? But it's the happiness of what you've learned along the way in your journey, and how you can in some way impart that information to others, and how their learning from it inspires you again to even learn more, because you're seeing things through their eyes and through their understanding of it, which impacts your understanding of those things. I find experiences are what make me happy, and having different experiences, meeting people and how they think or what their lives were like. I find that interesting. So no matter what job that I go to, I find that's the superficial part of it anyway. Whether you do this kind of job or that kind of job is not really relevant. What's relevant is that you're growing and feeding what is really part of your journey, part of what you should be bringing into the world. And because most of us are artists, just because your life as an artist took you down one road, it means you're still an artist, whether you did that one thing. So whether you're an actor or whether you're a painter or whether you're playing music, those are not the relevant things. The relevant thing is these are just the tools of which you push your art out into. So it would be strange to think that there's only one tool your whole life that you would ever push your art out of. And even though I run, by my standards, a company, a corporation, it's a nonprofit, it's also a charity, that I'm still the same, that I'm still using the same tools, the same abilities that I used in acting. So I don't feel the transition is so severe for me. And I don't think it is for others either. I think the last speaker, Ben, was saying it, that it was like he was just gliding into something that was natural for all the experiences and tools he already had. And I feel that's what we need to be doing as we think about transitioning into something else. Unless you really disliked what you did before, even if you hated it, for you to have done it that long, you would have developed certain skills, and those skills can be transformed into all kinds of different jobs. And there's no one kind of artist. There are people who are more hermit-like, and there are people who need a lot of social interaction, and there are people who are used to a certain way of how their life is, or a place that they want to live, or I feel as artists that we're feeling our way through our journey more than anything else. And through feeling, we're making sense of that feeling. And that's what cultivates our need to be the artists that we are. But you can do any job and still cultivate that. You just have to find something that feeds you in the same way that any other artistic thing you did fed you before. Have I talked long enough, or do I keep going? Do I keep going till Scott comes back? I'm happy to keep going, by the way. I just didn't want to over.
Scott's up. Take a breath.
Yeah.
Tanya, let's hear from our next star, and then we'll all get back together and kind of riff on all of these things that you've been saying.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you, Tanya Williams. Our next guest is also a performing artist, an award-winning actor. She first gained fame at the age of 19, playing Marilyn Monroe in the rock opera Hey Marilyn. She has also been an elected parliamentarian, representing ridings in both the Nova Scotia legislature and the House of Commons. She continues to work in theater, film, radio, and animation, where she has a large following for some of the characters that she has created. Please welcome Lenore Zann.
Well, thank you very much. And it's so great to be here and to hear all of you. What wonderful stories. And I really hope there are a lot of performers and artists out there listening who are looking for some hope, because believe me, there is hope, and it doesn't matter how old we get. We can keep reinventing ourselves. That's what artists do. We see life in different ways. We work together in different ways, and it's important to society that we keep going and that we keep contributing. So I'd like to start with that. Thanks for inviting me to this panel. And I do want to say that I'm very pleased and proud to be speaking today from the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, the people of the Dawn here in Nova Scotia. So as an actor with 45 years experience, I have to say I am very grateful to have had a long and varied career in the performing arts across Canada, the United States, and around the world. This was my dream as a very young girl, born in Sydney, Australia, and emigrating to Canada when I was 8 and growing up in the small town of Truro, Nova Scotia. I began acting at the age of 15 when I was cast to play Adelaide in Guys and Dolls in high school, grade 10. You know, she sings, "A person can develop a cold." And you could say that this is when the acting bug really bit me. And I determined at that time to have a career as a professional actor and a singer and to travel the world. That was my decision. And I did. Luckily, you know, giving thousands of performances really in live theater and film, television, and radio. I loved live radio, and we were doing a lot more of that. And actually, 1986, I won Best Actor of the Year for the ACTRA Awards for my voice in a play by David French, Saltwater Moon. At 30, I was asked to audition for an animation series, which we didn't know what it was at the time. It was in Toronto, but it ended up being the X-Men, the animated series. And my role of Rogue was and is truly me. And strangely enough, without really trying, this led to a whole new chapter in my life, in my performing career, voiceovers. And in the past 30 years, that series has become one of the top 2 animated series of all time. And I am extremely proud that every single performer is a Canadian. Yay, go figure. At about the age of 40, I noticed that live action roles in movies and TV were getting less plentiful. So I decided to write a one-woman play about Marilyn Monroe, who I had played first at the age of 19 in Hey Marilyn. But so I wrote a play, a one-woman show. I workshopped it at the Neptune Theatre in Halifax and performed it there. And then I took a chance, and at 40, I moved to New York, where I got an apartment and amazingly was able to get an agent and self-produced my play at a cabaret theater near Times Square called Don't Tell Mama. And then luckily through people that I met and performances that I did for other people, I was asked to do it off Broadway, and I did a 3-week run of my play there. After that, after 33 years of performing and living mainly out of a suitcase, I decided it was time to come home to Nova Scotia to be closer to my family and give back to the small community of Truro, who had been so supportive of me over the years. I bought a house in Truro in 2007 and moved home. And within a couple of years, I realized it was still difficult to make a living as an actor in Nova Scotia, but I wanted to stay. So when I was asked if I'd be interested in running for local politics, I thought, why not? I've got nothing to lose. And I was passionate about many important issues, including the fact that we need more women, particularly progressive women, in positions of power within all levels of government. Many people tried to persuade me, including some in my own family, who told me I was crazy to think I would win for the NDP in the traditionally conservative community of Truro in Cumberland, Colchester. But I said, why not? What have I got to lose? And my father agreed with me that I had just as much chance as anyone. So I won that election in 2009. And then I won 3 more elections after that, including a federal election for Prime Minister Trudeau's Liberal Party. And that took me up to Ottawa. Basically 12 years of my life was spent working 16-hour days, including weekends and holidays, as a politician. And it was worth it because I knew that I was helping address urgent issues that many people who normally had no political voice, I tried to be their voice in government. The last 2 years as the Member of Parliament were the most difficult years in my life. Since just 3 months after being sworn in, the country was hit with the global pandemic of COVID-19. And then 2 months after that, I was only 5 months elected. Here in my community, we had the terrible, terrible mass shooting, the largest mass shooting in Canada's history in Portapique, which is part of my constituency. It was horrendous. And I publicly said that we needed more gun control to get illegal weapons and semi-automatic weapons off our streets, but was immediately targeted by the Canadian gun lobby, who encouraged their members and others to attack me on social media and campaign to get me out of office. It worked. After a year and a half of constant misogynistic attacks and death threats, when a snap election was called in the fall of 2021, I lost my seat. Now, at that point, I had no idea what to do with the rest of my life. I was now 62 and I'd been out of the entertainment industry basically, for 12 years. So I got deeply depressed, I have to say. However, much to my surprise, a few months after losing the election, Disney called from Hollywood to ask if I'd be prepared to reprieve the role I originated 30 years ago in Toronto as Rogue in the X-Men animated series for Marvel Studios. Whew, what a relief. So I began recording the series on my 62nd birthday last November, and I'm still recording the new series. They've already announced a second season, and the show will be released next fall, 2023. Out of the blue, I was also contacted by a producer in Halifax, Barry Dunn, who asked me to play a lead role in his upcoming feature film, The Madones, which we've been shooting in Nova Scotia and will also be released in 2023. So truth really is stranger than fiction. You can't make this stuff up. So I've started writing a memoir about this wild adventure called life. And at this point, I'm calling it A Rogue's Tale. So what goes around comes around, and I'm back in the acting saddle again and very grateful for the opportunities provided. But my message to other performers and artists is this: never give up. Keep reinventing yourself. If something isn't working here, figure out something else, write something, put something together, produce something, start a production company, direct and produce shows for children, whatever it takes. Just don't give up and keep acting and producing and doing your music and writing. And don't let anybody tell you that it can't be done, because age really is just a number. Thanks.
Thank you, Lenore.
You're welcome.
Wise words, great advice. Tanya and Ben, please join us again. I noticed in all three of you, your opening remarks, that you all chose your transition. You chose to move from acting, singing to radio, politics, and the Real World Film Festival. What were you able to take from the first part of your career into the new part of your career? Let's start with you, Tanya.
Do you want anyone specific to start?
Yeah, you.
It's funny the way you just put it right there, that we chose. I feel we're all have an opportunity of choice, but I've actually, as you said that, I realized as I go along, I am sensing when a shift is going to happen in the future. And I already start moving and changing to accommodate a shift that's going to happen. So yes, when you're on camera, you know that you're physically going to get older, you might get heavier, you might get thinner, changes are going to happen. And there is, things are in fashion. So there came a stage for me, I think, when I'm thinking, what else after I'm not the person they're choosing all the time? Like, my mind is always thinking that way. So I don't feel in the way that it was like, oh, I just making this conscious decision. It's because I'm always in self-reflection and thinking about what is the next stage after this stage. So I think that would be the first step I would say for individuals is every morning when I wake up, and I wake up early, is the time I actually just make a little self-reflection of the day before. And every year on New Year's Eve, I don't party. It's not my thing. It never has been. It's the night that I sit in deep reflection about the year. And I'm constantly thinking about what has happened, what has transpired, and how do I shift any of that moving forward into the year. And I don't have an attachment. I don't think you can attach yourself to this is the way it's always been, so this is the way it always should be, because we know as we look around the world, we live in a changing organism that is moving and shifting, and either you're going to be standing still while it's shifting around you, or you're going to get into it and shift and move with it. So I hope that helps with that answer.
It does. Thank you, Tanya. Ben, how about you? What did you take from the world of opera, aside from the great stories, into the world of radio?
Well, that was the big thing, was that I had lots of stories, and was a natural fit to going to radio, and also and I have a natural bent for storytelling as well. Thank you, Mom. And so and the communication. So one of the first things I had to learn, this is something you would know, Scott, with and well, as actors, you too as well, is an opera. It was more sort of effusive. It was bigger. It's a house of 3,000 people in it. Well, on radio, you're talking to one person, and I had to learn how to do that. So I had some very wise people say, "No, Ben, no, just talk to one person." So I had to learn that. But I think the natural ability to communicate was something I brought from my first dream career, and just being able to relate and to tell stories, that was probably the bigger connection.
Thank you, Ben. And I get exactly what you mean about talking to one person. That's something we all in radio, especially, all have to remember, that there's only one person listening,
That's
generally
right.
speaking. Lenore, how about you? What did you take from acting into, well, obviously there's a certain amount of acting goes on in Parliament, but
Just saying, yeah,
just saying, yeah.
definitely. Look, it's funny, when I first ran for politics in 2009, and then I won, there were all these kind of haters that came out of the woodwork, on social media, and were like, what's an actor know about politics, right? Oh, a stupid actor, what do they know? And it's like, I'm sorry, but most actors that I know are extremely intelligent. We have to learn and research, and we have to be interested about everything and anything that we get involved with. And I believe also actors have a great deal of empathy. We need to care about people and about the roles we play, and learn about different people to be able to play, say, a single mother with 3 children living in a trailer versus, somebody who's running a company. And I was surprised at how much ignorance there is out there, and still, to be honest, a little bit of prejudice against performers, like kind of like an attitude like, stay in your box, like, oh, you're a good performer, just stay there. So it was a joy to use the talents that I had accumulated to give speeches, to write speeches, to get out there and talk to people about issues that are important to them and important to me and to the country or the area. But I found that acting was a fantastic learning experience to get somebody ready for politics. Yeah, and of course, we are also used to getting bad reviews and good reviews, so you really have to learn to take the bad reviews with salt and not believe all the good reviews. Just really have your own inner compass and follow that, and not be swayed by all the armchair politicians.
Actually, as you said that, Scott, you made me think of, as the other 2 speakers just spoke, the actual qualities that made it, that I felt I've always used, is you bring a certain confidence when you walk into a room, because you're so used to, like, most people go on 3 or 4 job interviews their whole lives. And as actors, we go on that 3 or 4, sometimes a day. So being able to walk in a room and see complete strangers and make that room comfortable immediately is a skill. And also, I felt I ran a company. I ran the Tanya company for the years that I was an actor, meaning, looking at my own finances, because we work not like we don't get the steady paycheck always, it comes and goes. So we have to sort of figure out our financing in turbulent times, whether sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. And knowing how to budget and knowing how to run your own business and market yourself and do it. Those were all skills that I moved when I made a company. It was just another company as opposed to the Tanya company. And I looked at it the same exact way. So I think we do bring a lot to the table.
Ben, any thoughts about what you've heard from Lenore and Tanya?
Well, I was going to comment that my skill was that I somehow believed in my mind that if there were checks in the register, there was still money in the bank. So I had a slightly different. Fortunately, money came.
How did you deal moving from one stage of your career into another stage? How did you deal with the pushback, the people that said, no, you don't belong here? Lenore, you talked about the haters. I think we've all faced haters of one form or another. It's more so, I think, for women and people of color, but we've all faced it. How did you deal with it? Tanya.
I felt fortunate because they were haters from the time I was born. They were people that didn't want me in the school that I was in, or I just find that that's become so normal. I don't even think about that part of it anymore, because not only was I Black and dealing with, racism from that perspective, from birth to all 64 of my years, but also as a woman, listening to men who are sure they know more than I do about anything and everything. So to me, that's just chatter in the background. I don't know how. I can only say I ignore it because it's happened so much. I mean, maybe it's more of a shock if you never had that and then it happens. But if that's your norm, and then the fact that both my parents are people of color, and so they are my father was a lawyer and then a Supreme Court justice, and then my mother a registered nurse and certified midwife. They went through that. So they already groomed me as a child to know that this is the way the world is. It's going to be unfair. So I don't look for a fair world. It doesn't exist. And yet it's quite easy to navigate around the naysayers and stay focused and just do. Success is the best, is the best remedy for everything. So I just don't really pay attention to it. I mean, I know that's easier said if it's something that one feels hurtful, but I've literally been with people who have said, can you believe that person said that horrible thing to you? And I went, who, what, what was it? That's how deaf I've become to it. I'm not even aware anymore that it's happening because I'm just on my agenda.
And Lenore, the haters, it sounds like you've dealt with a lot of them, not only in Parliament, well, not only the people who were pushing back against your stance about gun control, but the people in Parliament itself. How did you deal with it? You're muted.
Sorry. Well, in Parliament, you expect it because, there is opposition and there's government and opposition parties. And the way I look at it, they're roles that you play. So interestingly enough, it is like theater in that sense. When you go into the House of Commons or the legislature, people are oftentimes performing. They're grandstanding, some of them are hamming it up. Some of them are good and some of them are really bad actors. And, you just, I know that when I was in government, like we had the first NDP government in Nova Scotia, that was interesting. That was my first 4 years, but then we lost government and then went into opposition. So then you go into a whole different mode and a different role where now you are questioning the government on everything. And so really they're just different roles. But there's a way of doing it where you don't have to be rude and obnoxious, like, for instance, the Trump factor, I call it. You don't have to be calling people names and calling them down to the lowest and all that. You just stick to the issues. But the problem is when people have, it's almost like a Pandora's box has been opened, and people feel it's okay to be rude and racist and misogynistic and homophobic and say the nastiest things on social media and get away with it. And I don't think that that's good for society personally. I think it's harmed society and our civil discourse. So as either an actor or as a politician, sadly, you do have to deal with this stuff. And it can be very hurtful, and it can really hurt people's mental health as well. So, that's all I'll say right now. But I'll say things have gotten worse, not better. And plus, people are now taking guns and shooting people and stabbing them. And, it's scary. It's scary out there.
I hear you. Thanks, Lenore. Ben, it sounds like you were welcomed with open arms when you joined the CBC, but I can't imagine that was universal. I also can't imagine that being a Canadian going to, say, Munich or La Scala, doing a new role, that there wasn't a certain amount of pushback of who's this Canadian? Who does he think he is?
For example, take La Scala as an example. I didn't debut as an Italian opera. I debuted in a German opera, and so Heppner is a pretty German-sounding name, and so there was just it was not that difficult. Besides, by the end of Act Two, you're about four and a bit hours into the opera. And the Italians, about half of them would leave already. So they like good singing. They don't care where you're from. So that was helpful. I did get a little pushback on the radio thing, believe it or not. They thought, well, how can a singer be a host? That seemed maybe beyond our ken. But that went away very quickly. There was one gal that she was constantly criticizing everything that we did on our show on Saturday afternoon at the opera. But I made it my aim to try to win her over. And somehow I managed to do that, and just by paying some attention to her finally. And then a couple of times saying, well, actually, did you know that when I talked about this particular subject, it's not completely as how you say it. I'm right too. So I kind of showed my own knowledge and things like that. So that helped overcome. But quite frankly, I didn't have the kind of barriers that Tanya and Lenore did.
I do want to add to, Scott, that even though you know a lot, I think if you're moving into any new area, you have to, but this is just you have to know more than anyone else. You have to study it. You don't want to look like you actually don't know what you're talking about and that you don't know. So you can't always just glide in and start, really study the business. Even as an actor, I was always fascinated by everything about the entertainment industry, how everything worked from behind the camera, how production worked, how funding guidelines worked, how telefilm worked, how, Canadian Media Fund worked. So I was bringing those things as well, but I certainly have met people who have asked me for advice when they were starting something in the the nonprofit arts arena, but I realized that they haven't really done the homework and read up on things and tried to educate themselves a little bit around what it is that they want to do. They've only in a narrow way thought, oh, I want to just start this company or this nonprofit and do this one thing. And I go, well, you have to know all kinds of things, including how you start a nonprofit. Educate yourself or get a lawyer or, because they've started incorrectly and then gotten themselves into some, financial trouble by not having the HST number they needed or not having. So that's a big part of it. I don't think anyone should step into any new arena without any kind of training of some kind or education on it.
Or some intensive study. For sure. Thank you, Tanya. We're getting to the end of our time together. I do have one question that I wanted to pose to each of you. Looking back on your career, and I don't mean this to say your careers are finished because you've proven that they're not. But I'd be interested in knowing what you would tell your 25-year-old self if you could, magically pop back and whisper in the ear of a 25-year-old Ben, Tanya, or Lenore. Any thoughts on what you would say to that?
For me, it would be you need to spend more time on your languages, because opera singers, we have to do so. My French was, assez bien maybe, but as I started learning German, because I did mostly German repertoire, my French just kind of slid, and my German got better. But then also, Italian. I did some Italian, and then I had to do some work. I did work in Czech, and I did work in Russian, and I thought, if I were to tell 25-year Ben Heppner, work harder on your languages. It's something that's really important.
Thank you, Ben. Lenore, Tanya?
Well, I would say don't get hung up on one purpose. I used to think, what is my purpose in the world? And sometimes when that purpose seemed to get undermined or trod under or somehow dissipate or get destroyed, then I would get depressed because I'd be like, oh my God, I've lost my purpose. But really, your purpose keeps changing as time goes on. And so I would just say to any 25-year-old, including myself, don't give up. Keep searching, keep learning, keep moving forward, and don't let the bastards grind you down.
Thank you, Lenore. How about you, Tanya?
I can't think of anything I would tell my younger self, because I was pretty sharp young person. So anything I would say would only maybe shift and change or whatever happen. But I can see something with other young people, which is they think their career is a sprint. And I'm shocked at times when they're like, I've been at this job 6 months and I haven't been promoted yet and haven't gotten a raise. I'm like, 6 months? Like I'm surprised at how fast they want things to move. When the journey takes a long time. And as you can tell by everyone who's on here, it's not just one journey. They're taking different journeys. And I just think it's important to be realistic about what your expectations are, about what about anything is. I don't think I've ever made like a plan, like a business plan of my life. I don't think I've ever made a shorter one than 5 years. So I look at it as, from where I am now, this is what I'd like changed in 5 years. I'm shocked that people might have a 6-month or a 12-month plan, because I'm feeling not much is going to change in that short period of time.
Ben, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, one of the things I have talked to.
We've lost you, Ben.
Oh, really?
Oh, there you are. There you are.
No, I didn't mute. One of the things that I have told other young artists is there's a tendency when you're a young artist you see somebody that you like singing, or it could be as an actor or as whatever, and that you go to them and they sort of become like a guru, and you seek advice here, there, everywhere. And one of my bits that I talk with young singers is, look, you need to know that not everybody is a source of, you can learn from them, but you don't have to kind of prostrate yourself in front of them to be their guru or something. And that you need to develop a team for a singer. It would be, you need a teacher, you need a coach, someone who helps you with your music and your voice, and your acting. You have people in your life who have earned the right to speak into your life. Your partner, your spouse, those people that you allow in, listen to them. But don't let everybody just kind of give their opinion to you and toss you about like an an unmoored kind of bobbin in the water. You need to know who you are and who you listen to. I think that's really important. I mean, even for a singer, it's always you got to have a voice doctor. You got to have an ENT that knows when they look down your throat, they said, "Ooh, something's gone wrong." They already know what it looks like. So you build a team, and that's one of the big pieces of advice I would give any young singer.
That is such great advice. And I was just thinking, because people sometimes ask me, who is your mentor? I didn't have a mentor, but I didn't look for a mentor. It's not something that I thought about. I love what Ben said about building a team, except it's not in my nature to have a team. But I do believe if you can build a team, build a team. But I seem to be someone who I'm like a one-man show kind of a person. And even when I've tried to build teams, it's never worked for me. But I think if a person can, if they have that ability, I don't think I'm discerning enough to be able to build teams. I think that's what it is. I end up feeling I'm hurting other people's feelings when I don't think they're very good at what they're doing. So I try to just stay away from them. But if you're somebody who's more discerning, I think building a team would be a really great idea.
Thank you, Tanya. Well, we've just about run out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I thank all three of you for giving us the benefit of your experience and your thoughts. I'm going to ask if you have any final thoughts based on what you've heard, what you've heard from the others, what you've been thinking of while we've been speaking. Anybody want to go first? Anybody have any final words? Lenore, your microphone is off. I'm going to let you first.
Okay, I just want to say thank you to all of the artists across Canada, the ones who are listening to this and others who might listen to this in the future, because it's not easy to be an artist full-time, to keep going through the ups and downs and aging and having money, not having money, getting jobs, not having jobs, the constant worry about whether or not you are going to be working again, ever again. And I just want to say thank you for doing what you do, and please keep it up, because you make life beautiful for others, and you can't go wrong with that. So thank you so much, and keep it up.
Thank you, Lenore. That's wonderful.
I wanted to say thank you, Lenore. Thank you, Tanya, for this. Before as things were beginning, I was reading your bios and thinking, wow, you guys have done so many great things, and I feel inspired. I want to be more like you.
Back at you.
Thank you. Well, one of the things I would say as the last note is, even from the beginning of your careers, think about your retirement and how you'd like that to look. And I don't mean retirement means you're not working anymore, but I remember being in my 20s and 30s, and I saw older actresses who had not planned well, and the desperation that I saw of them in an audition, and them having no sort of financial sort of anything, that impacted me a lot when I was younger. And I know that choices I made were wrapped around not wanting to end up like that. So those were the things. That's what I motivate. My mentors are watching people who are doing things I don't want my life to be like.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Lenore. Thank you, Ben. This has been a great discussion, and I'm seeing all kinds of wonderful emojis popping up from the reaction corner. This has clearly resonated with a lot of people. So I want to thank all three of you for being with us today and being part of this discussion and being part of CSARN's Maintaining Creativity 7. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to meet you guys.
We are going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to start the breakout sessions. This is a chance to meet some new people, perhaps renew acquaintances. Check your email. You will find a link. You should find a link to the breakout session in your email inbox. If not, the link will be on the screen very shortly, and you can type it into your browser and join the breakouts that way. And we'll also post it in the chat box. So you have 3 ways of joining the breakouts. You will have to leave this meeting and enter the breakout. This will close down in about 10 minutes time. Each breakout will have a moderator who will guide the discussion, and then we'll regroup afterwards to hear a summary of what everybody else was talking about, and then find out the name of this year's winner of the Robert Johnson Visionary Artist Award. So enjoy your break, enjoy your breakouts. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We'll just let everybody rejoin, and then we will find out what everybody had to say this afternoon. All of the breakout rooms were moderated by members of the CSARN board, and I thank them for that. Let's just get everybody back together, and we'll sum up, and then we'll find out the winner of this year's award. So let's find out what we were all talking about. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for sticking around. And let's start with Philip Silver.
Okay, didn't expect that. We had a really interesting group and a really interesting discussion, and so many points of view. The group was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Myself made it 8. Toronto, Victoria, Vancouver, Alberta, Lethbridge, and Vancouver. So the West Coast wins today. Everybody had interesting ideas. There was musicians, visual artists, coaches, directors, textile artists, etc. Some of the points, boy, what to say. We talked about whether we leave certain aspects of our art because we have changed, or because the audience to whom we were directing that art has changed. And so there's some thoughts on that. Somebody said one of the ways to live through your career is to be versatile and keep your finger in many pies. Last bit of our discussion we started to get into, and I'm sorry we couldn't go further because I know it's one of CSARN's concerns, was intergenerational transfer of knowledge and expertise, and how important the panel, our group, thought that should be. One comment was made, and this should be passed on to the MC8 committee. With all due respect to the 3 panelists that we had, they were all successful in their transition. It might be worthwhile exploring in the future those who are struggling more, and the help that can be given to those who are struggling with those transitions. And I think that's, in fairness to everybody else in their time, that's about it. As I said to my panel, wait, and the book on what we've discussed will be out shortly.
Thank you, Philip Silver. Phil, again, Philip has been the chair of the CSARN Working Group for Maintaining Creativity for several years, and this is his last Maintaining Creativity. Phil, thank you so much for all your work over the past years. It's been a joy working with you.
It's been a pleasure meeting all of these artists across the country, and thank you, as always, for your role in pulling this all together and making it seem like we all know what we're doing.
Smoke and mirrors, Phil. That's what it's all about. Dan Lyon.
So we had a small but mighty group, and we also had the West Coast represented, and the Central Canada and Saskatchewan. And a variety of transitions, very interesting transitions, actually, that people have made, including, for example, from being a novelist to a psychotherapist to a composer. And, you know, one person had come very recently to filmmaking, you know, textile design to clog dancing to crafts and folklore. Anyway, it was a really fascinating group, and I'll just start with one thing that was kind of a note to CSARN, was a plea whether we could have a directory of members so that people could more easily connect with someone if there's a particular skill or art form or what have you that is needed in terms of a collaboration, people would be able to find each other a bit more easily. We riffed a bit on a few of the really fascinating things that we heard from the panel, including making life beautiful for others. And how do we do that? Do we do that through our art? Do we do that through mentoring? What other ways do we have? We talked a lot about curiosity, how curiosity carries you through, and how passion carries you through, that you pursue your passions, and that will drive you through to various transitions, and you change your direction if you change what you're passionate about. But we also talked a bit about economics, which was interesting, and how artists are used to making do, which means that many artists might be well positioned to do okay in a recessionary environment, but that's somewhat counteracted by the lack of planning that many artists have suffered in terms of not, either not learning how to manage their finances, or really not having had the benefit of periods in their life where there was, tremendous excess resources so that people could put away money. And, making transitions, I think we have to acknowledge making transitions is a bit easier when your bank account is flush. But sometimes even as a person whose bank account is not flush, you may be forced to make a transition, and you may not be able to anticipate in the way that was discussed by at least one of the panelists this morning, anticipate change and then adapt to it before it happens. It's great life advice. People are not always able to do that, but it still remains great advice, because change not only has happened to all of us, but it's going to continue to happen. I'll end my summary there.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm seeing a lot of agreement for the members directory, and that is something what we are working on. It's on our giant to-do list here at CSARN. In the meantime, I would encourage you, if you happen to be on Facebook, what we're doing in the meantime is we have set up a Facebook group, which is only for members of the CSARN community. It is called the CSARN Community Circle. So if you are on Facebook and would like to join, just find that on Facebook and ask to join, and you're a member of the community, of course we'll approve you. That's kind of the first step into a members directory. Bob Underwood.
Thank you, Scott. We had 8 people in the group, including myself, well represented, a little more focused on Western Canada, so Toronto West, but a remarkable group of seasoned artists who had made great successes out of shifting gears, or pivoting, as they call it in the business world. And their changes in career weren't necessarily because of a failed opportunity and the career they were in, but they were driven by their curiosity and as Tanya Williams said, her obsession to make change in her career. But we had a range of talent that we had. One particular one of our members from Bowen Island commented on her transition from an opera singer, very successful, to a playwright, to a person who staged special events on Bowen Island, to running a very successful and highly creative workshop on grief counseling. So I thought that was quite a remarkable transition. But other transitions included performing, directing, writing, education, became very successful teachers at some of the professional colleges across the country. But one thing that I, as a non-artist, realized well into the conversation was how much resilience there is embedded in successful artists. They make a career out of being rejected and being challenged. So as Lenore Zahn said today, being an artist is a perfect training ground for becoming a politician. And that's my comment for today. And I'd like to thank Phil Silver again for running some fabulous Maintain Creativity presentations and how much everybody appreciates them.
Here, here, and thank you, Bob. And I had a request to put the URL for the Facebook group in the chat. I have done that, so feel free to join us if you would like. Gary Neal.
Thank you. We were 7 in my group, and it's tough to summarize what it is we talked about. We covered the country from Belle Isle, Newfoundland to Vancouver, and many stops in between. We had 4 actors, although actors plus, because some get into writing and directing. We had visual artist, film set designer, set decorator. And we did talk a lot about transitions, both transitions into their current field, even if they've been in that field for 20 or so years, and new transitions. So beginning to think about what comes next. In particular, 2 people are seeing their future as being in writing that would like to get into the writing side of things. One has a new project on storytelling. One has had a dual career, both as a visual artist and a museum administrator. She's now left the museum administrative position and beginning to refocus on her art. And yes, we talked about adaptability. We talked about skills that could be transferred. We also got into a bit of a discussion about ageism toward the end, and interesting comments about the focus on emerging artists, and one of our participants said he's now writing a play. It's going to be called Fully Emerged, because he's so frustrated by the focus on emerging artists. So that's it.
Thank you, Gary. And as Vera Frankel said last week, we are always emerging. We are re-emerging. So we can all call ourselves emerging artists. That's why we're still here. Tabby Johnson.
You can't hear me there. So we had a group of fabulous women. I'd like to thank them all. We were from Wolfe Island, Nelson, Montreal, Vancouver, Northern Ontario, and Toronto. The questions, people were inspired. They found the speakers relatable. Things that were definite sitting and resting words were fluidity, feeling our way through our journey, cultivates, because that's something Tanya had spoke to. I was also blessed to, on one of the few occasions, I had another Black woman in the group. So we were able to talk to Tanya's thing about when you've been raised with racism at our stage of life, we don't even hear it anymore unless it's overt. And so it took the younger generation with their newness to allow us to know that we weren't crazy when we were saying, but there is racism. You guys won't let da. So that was very affirming. And it was about that sprung from the being fluid, that to stay alive, to stay in the game. Millie came up with the phrase from the 60s, keep on trucking. And then Celeste and I reminded ourselves of in our culture, it's the keep on keeping on. And because, as you know, I like to say, because we're not dead yet. We had visual artists, we had photographers. And one thing that was interesting was a lot of people were writing memoirs, one-woman shows, things like that. The often as women with children, and if you're single, and you would have to take a job. Many of the people who had to take a job took jobs within the arts somehow, like myself. You know, I was school visit coordinator at Harborfront. I mean, you tried to keep in the field, but just with a regular paycheck and a dental plan. Let's see. And the choices that women have to make as artists, many women have to, or feel they need to, make the choice to not have children. Our two women speakers are childless by choice. And they've done amazing things. Does that help or hinder? Who's to say? But it was an interesting conversation with that. But basically the takeaway was the capacity to evolve, fluidity as we age, not just in our joints, but in our thinking, and the transforming of skills, as opposed to transference of skills. It's the transforming of our skills to reach other goals, other things we may not have thought possible. The big takeaway was that it was great. That's me.
I'll take that takeaway. Thank you, Tabby. Keith Martin Gordy.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Phil, for all you've done for this. Wonderful. There's like 59 people on this screen, and I think that's astounding. So we had people from all over the country. We had most people had done several different kinds of artistic disciplines and other things in a career. Lots of transition. Composer, engraver, printmaker, working musical theater, photographer, videographer, poet, systems analyst, technology, lots of writers, an editor who then became a writer, crisis counselor, single parent with 2 kids, but who was a writer, corporate graphic, yeah, all sorts of things. The first takeaway we had was that this was reassuring to hear what those 3 individuals had to say and what they had gone through and how they had transitioned was very reassuring in terms of how we as artists all did this similar kind of thing. So that was kind of cool. Criticism came up. A person spoke about being in a writer's group, a person who didn't like groups, and then having other people criticize you. You know, you put out a book there and they tear it to bits, and how that was helpful and they were grateful for it. That was interesting. We got into the convergence was a word that came up, and art and technology. And one of the folks in the group talked about how as a filmmaker, as a creative filmmaker, spending 95% of your energy raising money to make your film. And that when the technology came, you can make a film now, a feature film, literally for nothing, if you have the camera and the software, and away you go. And how that changed and allowed more energy to be devoted to the creative aspect of it. We talked about mentoring and being mentored by an individual or being mentored by a group. How that shifted people's artistic expression. Yeah, and yeah, so it was great. What great discussion. We could have gone on for another hour or two. I think I'll end there.
Okay, thank you, Keith. From our westernmost board member in British Columbia, let's go to our easternmost in Nova Scotia, Jan Miller.
Hi, this was my first time moderating, so I really appreciated the opportunity. Thanks, Phil. We had a wonderful group of women, 9 altogether, and I found it really inspiring because I do think that the culture of being a woman has different kinds of challenges. And one of the things that really resonated in our group was that many did have, it resonates with Tabby's, that many did have children. And unlike the three panelists where there was sort of a linear path to their careers, many of them had to balance family, supportive caregivers, and then work their art within that. And it was challenging at times, but those that spoke to this were so proud of what their children had accomplished. Pieces of art as as adults contributing to the world. And I found that really inspirational. We had from Toronto, Calgary, Gabriola, Montreal, and then myself in Nova Scotia. And there were visual artists, author, director, jewelerists working in metal, actors, performers, and musicians. But what was interesting was the majority were visual artists. And one of the comments was that we talk a lot about transitions in terms of career path, but she brought out the really interesting point that as a visual artist, her art is transitioning. So that she moves from one art form or style of art, and she's had pushback on that. And she would be fascinated, similar to Ben talking about working as an opera singer and then moving into radio, the pushback there. Also, how do you handle pushback as you can continue to evolve as an artist, which I found really interesting. Many commented on how valuable or insightful Tanya's perspective was about thinking about your path, career plan, and not career plan and sort of writing out a business plan, but that you really knew it's really good advice to think about where you want to be and how do you survive. One of our wonderful women was saying the challenge as an artist, you don't have a pension and you're running into expenses as a caregiver. How do you survive? And I think that would be a really interesting on salon or discussion coming up. The other one of our women spoke about Ben's vulnerability, which is a great place to start talking about being lonely, talking about missing his family, and it really feeling safe enough that he could share that. And that we asked the question, because I thought it was a great question, what do you tell your 25-year-old self? And everyone sort of chimed in. One said to say yes. She felt too many times in her career she'd weighed all the conditions and said no too often. So she'd tell her younger self to say yes. Another said, I would start as an artist rather than start with something practical that my parents told me or my family told me. I'd start as an artist and then I'd work it all out. And another said that they would say to the younger self, variety is good. Don't feel that you have to follow one path, but you can allow yourself to explore many. And another said, which was really thought-provoking, she said, this doesn't relate to art, but I would take my younger self or young artist to a hospice so that they have to look at and witness what's at the end and figure out what they can do to make that as worthy and have the support that they need as they grow older. So it was a bit of a thought-provoking comment. I thank all my women. They were wonderful, and I hope I hit the jackpot next time around. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Jan. For a newbie, you do pretty well. Thanks to all of our moderators, and thanks to everybody for your great comments. Lots of stuff in the chat as well. I'm going to save that, so we'll keep it. And I noticed a bunch of people have signed up for the community circle. Thank you for that as well. Before we leave, we have one very special announcement to make. As promised, it's time to find out the winner of this year's Robert Johnson Visionary Artist Award. The Robert Johnson Visionary Artist Award is given every year to an artist whose exemplary work, produced away from the spotlight of the moment and without fanfare, has been a notable source of inspiration to others in the arts, and or whose visionary contributions to the arts and broader communities have been made in under-acknowledged or behind-the-scenes roles. The award is named for Bob Johnson, a veteran arts administrator and champion, whose long and illustrious career has included Deputy Minister of Culture for the province of Ontario and General Manager of the National Ballet of Canada. Bob was a member of the board of CSARN from its very beginning until he decided to retire earlier this year. Bob has always been a lover of dance, so it's appropriate that this year's winner is an elder dance artist. Terrell McGuire has been a dancer practically her entire life. She teaches and mentors others from York University to Indigenous communities in James Bay. Terrell was nominated by Catherine Leckie, who says in part, the award personifies Terrell's work. She has and continues to be a notable source of inspiration to others in the arts. Terrell is unique, true to herself, generous, collaborative, and does not rest on past accomplishments, but continues to strive for creative expression. CSARN spoke with Terrell a few days ago. Congratulations on being this year's award winner, Terrell.
Thank you, Scott. I'm so pleased.
You have heard Kathy Leckie's glowing words about you. What's your reaction to what she had to say?
I'm not particularly comfortable with, well, I'm definitely not comfortable with self-promotion, but I think that I have to, with some sense of perspective, acknowledge that it's true, what she had to say.
Absolutely. It is true. And anybody who knows you would say that. So,
okay, there we have it then.
Yes. Now, so many dancers have to stop dancing at such an early age, and you are still out there performing. What keeps you dancing?
Well, I guess it's the sense that if you lose momentum, you are going to become, or I am going to become stagnant. And although physically I have injuries that I have to accommodate and work around in what I do, it's still, to me, Scott, is physical expression, dance. It is my primary creative outlet, aside from teaching and sharing ways of moving and ways of finding that finding the body as a vessel, an instrument of creative expression. So I think it's just something that I feel I need to keep doing and need to keep adapting to whatever capability I have. And that takes me to my interest in other work that I do, which is working with older adults at one end of my teaching spectrum. And that is, I just find so much satisfaction in helping people find their bodies, find ways of understanding and knowing and using their bodies. And again, as a way of expression, but also as a way of being healthy in this life and in this world. I think it's, it's so important. We have to move as we get older as much as we can. So even people with extreme disabilities or limitations, there are always some ways of moving, even if it's just maybe the eyeballs. So it's as much movement as we can bring out of ourselves, the better off we are.
And mentoring has been a very important part of your life and your career. You've been a CSARN mentor, but I know you've mentored many people in many other locations and forms. Yeah. What inspires you to be a mentor?
I think we're all in this together, right? And we all need all the help we can get, and we need to support each other. We lift each other up. And I think, you know, Scott, the performing arts can be very competitive and not always very, not always collaborative, not always very collegial. But when they are, I think things are so much more rewarding for everyone.
Terrell, congratulations again. We're really so thrilled that you are our fourth winner.
Thank you. I'm so grateful and appreciative, I can assure you.
Congratulations again to Terrell McGuire, and thank you for everybody who nominated, not only Terrell, but the other nominees. It was a very, very difficult decision to make this year, and we encourage you next year, probably around June or so, to nominate next year's winner of the Robert Johnson Visionary Artist Award. We'll let you know when the nominations open. I'd like to invite you to continue the conversation at our next online salon. Our next on salon is 1 week from tomorrow, the 15th of November at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time. You can sign up on our website, csarn.ca. And that just about wraps up another Maintaining Creativity. Thanks again to our three guest stars today, Ben Heppner, Tanya Williams, and Lenore Zan. Thank you to CSARN's Board of Directors, led by our chair, the Honorable Marie Poulin, the MC7 Committee, led by Philip Silver. Thank you again, Phil, and the Awards Committee, led by Corey Coe. Thank you to our breakout moderators. You were all marvelous. I thank my executive assistant, Solange Furman, and mostly thank you for you. Thank you to you for being here today, without which this would have been pointless. If you missed any of our three chapters, we will be posting them, videos of the chapters, on our website in the days to come. We're also going to be sending out a survey through SurveyMonkey to get your response. We kind of need that to show our sponsors and the Government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors program, which funds this event every year, how we're doing. So help us by helping yourself by doing that when it comes. We wish you happy, healthy, and creative days ahead, and we look forward to seeing you, if not before, certainly next fall at Maintaining Creativity 8. Be well.